Hello and welcome. I'm Pratap Singh. You're joining us on NewsX World. Let's take a quick look at the headlines that we're tracking for you. Pope Francis held a brief private meeting with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance at the Vatican, exchanging Easter greetings. The encounter took place after Easter Mass, where the Pope later greeted crowds in St. Peter's Square. Pope Francis expressed concern over rising global anti-Semitism and condemned the ongoing violence in Gaza. During his Easter address, he called for an immediate ceasefire, highlighting the devastating humanitarian crisis, especially for Gaza's Christian community. Ukrainian President Zelensky says Russian shelling continues despite Moscow's announced Easter ceasefire. Blasts are reported in Russian-held Donetsk during the same 30-hour truce window. The U.S. Supreme Court temporarily blocks the Trump administration from deporting a group of Venezuelan migrants under a rarely used wartime law. The Trump government urges the court to lift the order. Israeli forces continue striking the Gaza Strip, with 54 people reported killed in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, Hamas says the fate of an Israeli hostage remains unknown after his guard's body is found following an Israeli airstrike. Iran and the United States agreed to begin drafting a framework for a potential nuclear deal after talks. A top U.S. official calls very good progress. President Trump threatens military action if Iran does not swiftly accept a new deal to halt nuclear weapons development. Thousands of anti-Trump protesters take to the streets in communities large and small on Saturday. The demonstrations coincide with the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolutionary War. Pakistan deports almost 20,000 Afghans this month ahead of its 30th April deadline for undocumented migrants. The Taliban says 700 to 800 families leave daily as Minister Ishaq Dar consults in Kabul, with up to 2 million more expected. The U.S. Supreme Court has ordered the Trump administration to pause the deportation of several Venezuelan men accused of gang affiliation. The individuals are currently detained in Texas. They were being deported under the Alien Enemies Act, a rarely used law from 1798 that allows the president to remove citizens of countries considered hostile during times of conflict. President Trump has invoked the law to deport Venezuelans he alleges are part of the Tren de Aragua gang, calling it a threat to U.S. national security. Over 130 individuals have been sent to a high-security prison in El Salvador. Civil liberties groups, including the ACLU, have challenged the process, saying detainees weren't given the opportunity to contest their deportation, and some received notices only in English despite not speaking the language. The Supreme Court previously ruled the law could be used, but said individuals must be given a chance to challenge their removal in court. In one case, a Salvadoran man with no criminal convictions was deported in error. The court ordered his return, but the administration has said he will not be allowed to re-enter the U.S. Since returning to office in January, President Trump's immigration policies have faced increasing legal scrutiny. Quinton A. Hitchcock, American political consultant, is joining us live from Washington, D.C. Quinton Hitchcock, what do you make of this ruling by the Supreme Court? Obviously a big setback for the Trump administration.
It's a big setback, no doubt. It's also a very unprecedented situation. I don't think any time in our history have we had such hotly contested legal battles as it pertains to immigration policy. Something that's very important to remember, and this is the president's stance on this, and that is there's no court in America, certainly not any district court, but not even the Supreme Court, that they view has the influence to dictate foreign policy. So that's the president and the White House's view of this. Now, the Supreme Court, basically the entire opposition, their view is, listen, we need due process in this country. If somebody's a criminal, if they're going to get deported, if they're going to stay, okay, that's irrelevant. What they need is due process. And we did not see due process in the example of Mr. Abrego Garcia, who was not just deported, but sent to an El Salvadoran prison. So those are the two issues. I don't expect the president to really comply with this. There's no evidence that he's complied with much when it comes to court orders as it pertains to foreign policy. So this will continue to play out in the courts. But in the meantime, what's going to be happening? I don't know. I expect deportations are going to continue. And the only other thing I want to mention is that these are not all Venezuelans. Okay, that's a very, very important distinction. The group that we're talking about here, as you mentioned just a few minutes ago, is a group of Venezuelan nationals that are suspected of being involved in organized crime and violent gang activity. So they're actually being held in my home state, which is Texas. So that's the issue right now. It's not all Venezuelans, but this will continue to play out in court, and it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Absolutely. In fact, talking, of course, about now what steps the Trump administration will take next. Are they going to challenge this? Reportedly, some statements did come out saying that the court shouldn't have done this. But what is expected next now from the Trump administration? What steps will they take next? As obviously, they wouldn't be happy with this development.
So Pam Bondi, who is Trump's attorney general, she runs the Department of Justice. She will, and I expect already has, challenged this. This will certainly play out in court. So any Trump White House, whether it's this administration or whether it's the administration from 4 years ago, is heavily involved in challenging legal orders in this country. So that will certainly be the case. The question is not if they're going to challenge it. The question is, how are they going to execute foreign policy until there is a legal resolution to this in the courts? So that is what's going to be the most interesting aspect of this. Again, my professional opinion is that Trump is not going to abide by this, and that this does not halt or delay any of his deportation executions or any of his foreign policy agenda. But again, it'll be interesting to see. We are truly in unprecedented times. And when I say that, that's not hyperbole. I really do mean that never before in this country have we had certain situations related to deportations or foreign policy, specifically immigration policy, the way we have seen in just the last 3 or 4 weeks.
Yes, and now as far as, of course, Quinton, this order is concerned, could it have ramifications on further deportations as well, potentially? Because obviously this is a policy of the Trump administration. They want to continue with these kind of deportations. So could this order set a precedent going ahead?
It could certainly set a precedent. I want to also give you a different side of this that most people don't realize. The Trump White House, they truly believe that the more we talk about these specific immigration cases, the more that makes them look strong on the border, the more that makes them look strong on immigration policy. Remember, one of the biggest reasons why this president was reelected for a second term is because a lot of Americans in this country, of either party, of both Republican and the Democrat Party, have been frustrated with our government's handling of the border and our government's handling of illegal immigration. So they believe that this is a strong issue for them. I mentioned a couple days ago that the case of Mr. Abrego Garcia in El Salvador, they believe that that specifically made them look very, very strong, and it made the opposition look very, very weak. And there's a lot of people in this country that were upset that our government has not done more. So that's number one. The president, I don't think, is backing away from this now. I don't think he's going to back away from this in the future. And to answer your question, is this going to influence or have anything to do with how immigration policy is enforced moving forward? I think the answer is no. But I think that there's a chance that this allows the White House to get more aggressive with how they can enforce allowing immigrants to come into this country, and specifically deporting those who are here illegally.
All right, let me quickly, in fact, then turn to more news coming in this hour. Thousands of Americans took to the streets across the country for the 50,501 protests. That's 50501, named for 50 protests, 50 states, one movement, coinciding with the 250th anniversary of the start of the American Revolutionary War. Demonstrations took place from outside the White House to Tesla dealerships, with many protesters voicing various grievances, including calls for the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador. Political protests in the U.S. have become more frequent, with earlier demonstrations like the hands-off protests in April drawing tens of thousands. According to the latest Gallup poll, 45% of voters approve of President Trump's performance in his first quarter, although that's lower than the 60% average for past presidents. Protests focused on Trump's Department of Government Efficiency initiative, which aims to cut government jobs, as well as his refusal to press for Abrego Garcia's return. The protests were largely peaceful, with a few confrontations, and many demonstrators carried signs reading "No Kings," referencing the anniversary of the start of the revolution against British rule. In Boston, attendees commemorated the battles of Lexington and Concord, reflecting on the ongoing fight for liberty. Protests also took place across the nation, signaling increasing discontent with Trump's leadership, especially regarding his handling of the economy. Despite earlier rallies and a dip in Trump's approval ratings, protests are showing no signs of slowing down. Let's listen in to what some of the protesters had to say.
I think America's great because of the diversity we have, and my family members from different countries work so hard to come here, and my students pay a lot of money and work hard to come here too, and they shouldn't feel unsafe on campus.
I know that there are people that, claim to be Republicans. They feel like they don't have a voice. It's not the Republican Party they joined. And so we need to get together on those issues and become issue-based. We're trying to do that and not be divisive in our message, but to say that we are united on building back that democracy, to being a partner to the world, to being that beacon that we used to be fair, to be inclusive, to be all those things that our country stands.
Quinton A. Hitchcock, American political consultant, continues to be live with us from Washington, D.C. in the United States of America. Quinton, what do you make of these protests that have erupted across the U.S.? How are they being viewed in the states where you are?
Well, interesting question. I think that anytime Trump has been in office, and I do mean anytime, there have been protests. Maybe not nationwide protests, but we've certainly had very aggressive, very large-scale protests in this country about any specific issues. None more sensitive than, I think, the war in Gaza. None more sensitive than immigration policy. So this is nothing new. This administration is well acclimated to certain opposition and protests by now. So I don't think anything is unusual about this. But again, and I think this is worth saying again, we are living in unprecedented times in America, specifically with how our executive branch is always at odds with our legal system in this country, how there are so many things playing out in our court system on a daily basis, immigration not being the only one. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how this plays out. Remember, there's also a political aspect to this as well. We have our United States midterm elections in about 18 months, and that will dictate who has power in this country. Are we going to have a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican White House? Because if that's the case, that's what's making this process, that is what's allowing this to happen, is that the other side doesn't have the power, they don't have the members, they don't have the votes to really push back on anything from a legislative standpoint. So that's why a lot of this is having to take place in the courts. But when we have our elections in 18 months, that'll be a referendum on whether people in this country agree with how the president has handled immigration, or if they think he's gone a little bit too far.
All right. Also, Quinton, as far as, of course, these protests in particular are concerned, were they just for a day to mark, of course, this occasion? Do we expect them to continue to this coming week as well? And was there any agenda of the protests? Were they, for instance, taking on the DOGE, or was it overall against the Trump administration in its entirety?
Well, the first answer to your question, I don't think it's going to be a protest that lasts many days. Let's remember, most of these people have to go to work on Mondays. So I think this was a weekend protest. I do not expect it to last much longer than that. Now, the other part of your question, who exactly are they protesting? You mentioned Doge, for example. While I don't think they were protesting Doge, I don't think you need to convince any Democrat in this country to protest Doge. I think there's a lot of different aspects of the president's administration that are wildly unpopular with the Democrat Party, with the Progressive Party in this country. So I don't think they were out there protesting those aspects. I think this was solely about the immigration issue. But that being said, it's worth noting there are many, many issues that the president gets protested on a daily basis in this country. So nothing like that is unprecedented.
All right. Also now, Quinton, if we talk about the approval ratings, they're still reportedly at 45% according to some reports of Donald Trump. That's still high. It's slightly lower than what other presidents have had in the first quarter of their term. What do you make of those reports of the approval ratings of Trump?
Well, the approval ratings for him are very high. And statistically and historically, that has not always been the case, especially with President Trump. I'll use 2016 as an example. He gets elected, he wins the Electoral College narrowly. People say, okay, let's give him a fair shot. He gets in office, and his approval ratings could not be any lower. In fact, if memory serves me correctly, I think at one point he may have had some of the lowest approval ratings of any sitting president in history. Well, that's not the case anymore. And I think there's many, many political issues and political reasons for that. But it's also important to realize that the Democrat Party in this country, their approval ratings and their popularity as a whole has never been lower. And that's a real issue for them. That's a real concern that you see a lot of leaders in the Democrat Party voice, especially with elections coming up, that their popularity is just not resonating. Their policy views, a lot of what they are selling the American people is just not resonating with them. So it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. But the president's approval ratings, at least for right now, are very, very high. Now, the one last thing I'll add is that we have polled in this country the Americans' view on specific issues, not just the president, but specific issues as it relates to him. One of those issues is the handling of deporting illegal immigrants, which again is even without due process. And you'd be shocked to find that many Americans are actually, I would even say most Americans, are supportive of how the president has handled immigration policy. So the more we talk about immigration, I think the more we talk about foreign wars, the war in Ukraine, the war in Gaza, this is making this president look that much stronger.
All right. Appreciate you joining us, Quinton Hitchcock, with your perspective on that big story. Let's move on now to some more news coming in. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has launched a bold campaign plan ahead of the April 20th election, pledging tax cuts, major defense spending and a tougher stance against U.S. pressure. Carney, who took office after Trudeau's resignation, warned that President Trump is threatening Canada's sovereignty with tariffs and annexation talk. His plan includes cutting income taxes, investing in infrastructure, and also boosting defense to exceed NATO's 2% target by 2030. This includes new submarines, drones, and Arctic icebreakers. Carney also proposed a trade diversification fund to reduce reliance on the U.S. market. He promised to balance the budget in 3 years by trimming the federal workforce without touching healthcare or pensions. Bhashwati Mukherjee, former diplomat, is joining us live from New Delhi. Bhashwati Mukherjee, your thoughts on, of course, these moves made by Mark Carney since taking office as Canadian Prime Minister. What do you believe his strategy is going into the election?
Well, his strategy is to improve the popularity points which were at an all-time low under his predecessor, Trudeau. To a certain extent, he has succeeded because the Canadians believe that President Trump is trying to bully them and is trying to insult them by saying that Canada should become a part of the United States. So these measures, which include how to protect Canada's economy and how to protect Canada's security, considering that for decades now, Canada actually worked like a junior partner of the United States on all issues, including on security and trade. So this breakaway has helped to raise the percentage points of the Liberals in the polls, but not quite enough right now for them to win. There is still a narrow lead by the Conservatives. but certainly he has been able to make an impact precisely because Canadians feel very indignant about what they consider to be unprecedented bullying by President Trump, and never has the relationship between the two countries been at a lower level to the extent that apparently there was even a match where the American flag was booed and the American players were booed. This is something unprecedented which has happened between Canada and the United States. So we have to watch and wait. But certainly these moves have helped to move up the Liberal Party ratings, and they have a much better chance now, they say, Canada watchers say, than they had when it was at an all-time disastrous low under Trudeau, his predecessor.
Do you believe, he's attempting to be populist by taking this harsh stance against the U.S.? Will that increase his approval ratings according to you, Bashpati Mukherjee?
Well, populism is never a very smart way to get for medium-term and long-term economic gains. This populism will get him some votes, but the point is that the Canadian economy itself is in very bad shape because Trudeau was not a good economic manager. So what would be better for him is to offer, like the Conservatives are doing, measures to restructure the Canadian economy and get it back to where it should be. That he is not doing. What he is doing is, as you rightly point out, measures which go down well with the public, measures which give the impression that Canada is capable of standing up to what they consider American bullying. Actually, Canada, in my perspective, is not capable of doing that because for decades Canada has relied completely on United States, almost like a junior partner, not the 53rd state that of U.S. as President Trump wants, but very much a junior partner. There's no doubt about it. So it will take them a lot of time to come out of that shadow and to build up their own economy, their own armed forces, their security, etc., in a manner by which they can never challenge United States. United States is also a nuclear weapon state, which Canada is not. But to come anywhere close to being even a 10% challenge, they would have to do much better than what.
All right. Bashpati Mukherjee, appreciate you joining us with your perspective on that big story. And that's all the time we have for today. We will continue to bring you more news and updates from around the world right here. Stay tuned.